Hello and welcome to Nope There's Only Trash Here podcast, episode 4. Maybe I should stop calling them episode 4 and episode 3. Maybe I should actually date them. Well, the date today is the 1st of April, and that's no joke. Good bit of light-hearted humour for the start of the old podcast there. Yeah, this is like the first podcast where it feels routine now. And I guess that's a good thing. You know, it's good to kind of get into a routine of doing this, because whenever you start something new on YouTube, you know, any YouTuber will tell you this, there's always this kind of buzz and excitement that you get when you first start it up. You're like, yes, I'm doing something new and different, I'm enjoying it, you know. And even though the podcast hasn't really taken off in any sort of big way, I do appreciate all the support, or I do appreciate that I've managed to hit 6 subscribers. You know, for me that's quite an accomplishment. So, yeah, anyway, as you might already be able to tell, couple of things before we get into the actual podcast itself. It's just me again, because I don't know, I couldn't find anyone or think of anyone in particular for this podcast, just based on what news has kind of come out. I think the best person I could have got on this was Proto Mario. And I have to say, episode 3 I think went really well with him. I don't know what you guys thought of Proto as a guest, but of course leave your comments below on any thoughts or feelings you have about the podcast. But yeah, I felt like last week's episode went really well and got a lot of good topics done. So I think he would have been the only one to really be a guest, considering what news has happened in the last week. But I don't know, I don't want to go overkill on the guest, especially this early on the podcast. Also, I have to apologise for my downgrade in my mic. I know it's not a terrible mic, but I have to use my headset mic because I am home for Easter, because I'm a student, and I forgot to bring my snowball mic. Yeah, it was very busy, or it was a bit of a mental kind of rush when I was packing all my stuff, so I kind of forgot to pack my mic. So apologies for that, and apologies that I'm by myself. Although really, you know, I think I can fill another podcast. I did it with episode 2. Let's try again with episode 4. So right, let's get into gaming news. So this week I actually have 4 different bits of gaming news, because 2 of them are big things and the other 2 are kind of smaller things. But I thought, well, if I talk about one of the smaller things, I'll have to talk about the other one. It wouldn't really be fair if I only talk about one of them. And also, because I'm by myself, I need to fill up the time, because I want to try and hit that 50-minute mark. So the biggest news, I can't quite decide what the biggest news is, because 2 games got revealed. 2 games were announced and revealed and shown to the public. So a very exciting week for gaming. But I think I'm going to have to say the biggest news was Battlefield 4. Now, personally for me this wasn't the biggest news, but yes, Battlefield 4 has been revealed. Yes, Battlefield 4 has been revealed, and yeah, that's pretty much it. The details about it, or the things that, you know, you'll kind of be interested in, is that it's running on a whole new engine called Frostbite 3 engine. Apparently we were on Frostbite 2, who knew? There's going to be, you know, huge environments, variety of vehicles. Single player will track your progress to add a layer of social competitiveness. I don't think that's how you say that word, but whatever. And also, that's about it. There are other subtle things about the game, but that's about it really. So they released a trailer that was like a minute trailer and all that to show off the game, and they also released 17 minutes of gameplay footage. Now, I saw the reveal trailer first, because obviously it's the new Battlefield 4 game. If I'm going to have any sort of a credible gaming podcast, I kind of got to keep up with this kind of stuff. So I watched the minute trailer and I was not impressed at all. It was basically these random shots. It's exactly what you would think it would be. You know, in your head, if you haven't seen the trailer, think right now what you think a trailer for a new Modern Warfare FPS style game would be like. And that's exactly what I saw when I watched the Battlefield 4 trailer. It was just random shots of people with guns, or soldiers with guns, explosions, planes, with Rihanna singing in the background. It's the Run This Town, I think, with Jay-Z and Kanye West. See, I'm down with the kids. I'm a home dog, or whatever the heck. Yeah, so not impressed. There was nothing in that trailer that I thought, wow, I've got to get this one. It's all very generic stuff. Nothing I really was I wasn't impressed. So, of course, again, I thought, well, I wasn't impressed by that. Maybe the 17 minutes of footage will impress me. Maybe something in there will be interesting. Maybe there's some sort of new take. Maybe the gameplay would have been changed. I didn't watch the whole 17 minutes. I won't lie. I sat down to watch it. Thought, okay, great. Let's check out the new Battlefield. No, because the way I stand on Battlefield, right, is that I really enjoyed Battlefield 2, and I'm talking about 2, not Bad Company 2, on the PC. In fact, I still have that game. And that game was really enjoyable, you know, a great multiplayer PC game that I used to play with my mate's house. We used to, you know, jump in the Jeep, and then one would go duh, 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 and the other one would shoot 2 bullets. It was hilarious at the time. We were young, what can I say? And I had a great time with that game. And then I played Battlefield 2 Modern Combat. Yeah, the 2 Modern Combat, not 2 on the PC and not Bad Company, 2 Modern Combat. Had a good time with that. That's when you could, like, phase into people and control, like, any character. And then Battlefield Bad Company 2 came out, and I enjoyed that game, even though the multiplayer was really good, but the single player was a bit weak. And then I played Battlefield 3, where the single player was a bit better, but the multiplayer was a bit worse. So I'm not a big Battlefield fan, but of course I like good first-person shooters, and I do like the modern kind of warfare-style shooters. I still want to check them out and play them. So I watched the thing, and halfway through the 17 minutes of footage, I just turned it off. I just couldn't watch anymore. It was really dull. It starts off by having Total Eclipse of the Heart playing at the beginning, which, for me, I got very emotional. I love that song in that hipster kind of ironic way. I do enjoy that song. And then there's these people in a car. You should go watch. Don't go watch the footage yourself. I was going to recommend it. Watch the trailer and make your judgment of that. Don't watch the 17 minutes of footage. See, that's the problem. You know you're in trouble with your game when you have to release 17 minutes of footage for anyone to care. At the moment, that video I think has 8 million views on YouTube. I have no idea how that happened. But I can't imagine many people got all the way to the end of those 8 or enter the 17 minutes. No way, it's so dull. So yeah, so it's just you walking around doing, again, exactly what you would expect to see in a game like Battlefield. Nothing new, nothing interesting, just dullness. So I do really enjoy Call of Duty, and you can say, yeah, they're repetitive or whatever, but 2 different companies make them, and each of the Call of Duty games, if you look at the campaigns alone, there is different stuff in them. There are reasons to play those games. But when it comes to the Battlefield games, sure, they release one every 2 years, but there's nothing that makes it distinct. There's nothing that makes it worth playing. I'm just talking about the campaign here, by the way, because I really enjoy first-person shooter campaigns. That's half the reason why I buy them. It's why with Black Ops 2, even though I didn't enjoy the multiplayer, I still say that's a good game because I enjoyed the campaign and zombies. So, yeah, with this Battlefield, just nothing new, because Battlefield 3 copied that. There's the problem. There's the problem right there. That's why I have more problems with Battlefield, because I'm not a big Battlefield fan. The multiplayer is pretty decent, but I will defend Call of Duty and say that is a good gaming franchise that people should play, and they're not bad games. People just don't like things that are popular that they don't like. But I won't defend Battlefield, because Battlefield is just taking from Call of Duty. I know some people, you can't really argue with that sentence. Some people will say, no, that's not true, but that's because they hate Call of Duty. And won't kind of admit that. Although the people I don't understand are the people who love Battlefield but hate Call of Duty. That makes no sense. And then again, I don't hate Battlefield, but yeah, so with Battlefield 4, it's kind of exactly what you expect. Nothing interesting there. I have no interest in this game. The graphics are really good. You know, this new Frostbite engine is really good and does look very detailed, but again, that's not impressive anymore, especially with this kind of shooter. You know, it means there's more potential about what you could do, but when the potential or when the gameplay comes down to more generic current war setting, you know, once again, you and a group of soldiers going along. They keep trying to hammer that home. With Bad Company 2, you're in a group of soldiers and you're meant to actually like some of them, but They really need to watch something like The Hurt Locker or a Band of Brothers, the people who make the Battlefield games. So, yeah, so it does look good, and, well, it, technically looks good, but very unimpressed, pretty much, of my opinions of Battlefield 4. Right, so the main attraction, the big game that I'm more excited about, that got announced, it got revealed, forget Battlefield 4, was Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. So, a bit of backstory on this, because I had no kind of real backstory on this. Pretty much about a year ago now, coming up to about a year ago, Hideo Kojima, the guy behind Metal Gear Solid, the director, he's the guy. Like how Miyamoto is the guy for Mario, Kojima is the guy for Metal Gear Solid. He announced this game called Ground Zeroes, Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. That was meant to be a spin-off, which involved you, Big Boss, the main guy from Metal Gear Solid 3, a new game involving him. I don't want to get into the story of Metal Gear Solid here because my head would explode if I tried to explain it, but yeah, you were playing the guy from Metal Gear Solid 3, Big Boss, and I won't go into how Big Boss is connected to all the games because it's really weird. But also, apparently, something I didn't know was that there's this other game called The Phantom Pain that kind of got secretly announced by Kojima as being this. There actually very little was announced about it. There was a few details, but yeah, he was saying back at the end of 2012, I completely missed this, that this game called The Phantom Pain, they were making that as well as Ground Zero. But recently at GDC, during the last week, he announced that Ground Zeroes and The Phantom Pain are coming together as one game to be Metal Gear Solid 5. And in Metal Gear Solid 5, you play as Big Boss, and it's pretty much, I guess it's Ground Zero, but I think a lot of ideas they were developing in the Phantom Pain, they're just bringing it over for Metal Gear Solid 5. So, of course, whenever a new Metal Gear Solid game gets announced, I get really excited. I won't lie. It's not a perfect game series, but I definitely do get excited. I never played Metal Gear Solid 4, but I remember being so excited about that game. And it was the only game that I was really excited about that wasn't coming out on a console I had. It was a PS3 only game, and I only had an Xbox 360 and a Wii, so that was the only game I was really gutted about. So I do still get really excited for these games, and the trailer, absolutely go watch the trailer for Metal Gear Solid 5. It's amazing. It's like the perfect trailer. It's how a trailer should be done. It's interesting. It's hard to explain, but the one thing I really like about the trailer is that they do the whole thing about you're not 100% sure what you're seeing, and then it kind of comes together, and then it doesn't really come together, but you piece it together as you go, but it doesn't quite fit, because of course you have to play the game to find the story. But pretty much the trailer there's two separate trailers, and they involve Big Boss being in some sort of hospital and trying to escape the hospital from people slaughtering everyone in that hospital. And it's just so well done, that trailer, I have to say. Initially, I'll be honest, I kind of thought that it was Liquid, because dumb IGN, in case you don't know, I read IGN because I don't know, but I read IGN, so IGN took forever to piece together that this was meant to be Metal Gear Solid 5. They were like, Ground Zero and Phantom Pain is one game? We don't know if there's some sort of DLC for Ground... They're so dumb. Because at the end of the trailer it comes up Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, and Wikipedia said... I don't know, I shouldn't complain about IGN on the podcast. I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid 5. But yeah, because I didn't know what I was watching, I initially thought that the lead character was Liquid. Now, I know it sounds weird, but they intentionally don't show Big Boss's face for quite a while in that trailer, for about half the trailer. Or in one of them anyway, they don't show Big Boss's face. But his left arm is gone. So I was kind of thinking, because I didn't know this was Metal Gear Solid 5 and all that kind of stuff, I went into the trailer blind. I kind of thought that maybe this was Liquid actually being alive at the end of Metal Gear Solid 1, and this was some sort of game about Liquid. Now, I know this isn't really gaming news, but it was some sort of weird idea I kind of had and pieced together in my head, and I had it all making sense in my head, and then it was like, oh, it's actually Big Boss, I'm a dumb idiot. Because I think it was Liquid's left arm that got removed, because in case you don't know, in the very first Metal Gear Solid game, Revolver Ocelot loses a hand, and then at the end of the game you kill Liquid through Fox Die, spoilers. So at the beginning of the second game it turns out Ocelot has taken Liquid's hand and attached it to his own to replace the hand that he lost in the first game. So I was trying to remember, I was like, was it his left hand or his right hand, or which hand was it that Liquid lost? Maybe I should look it up now, but yeah, because the Big Boss, or Big Boss in the trailer has lost his left hand, or that's what it looks like. So that's kind of pretty cool, and I can't quite remember all the details. And wait, hold on. Oh yeah, Liquid Snake. I'm looking up on Wikipedia because yeah, I had this idea that maybe it turns out somebody saved him from the Fox Die, and that kind of made it was really interesting, I think. Oh, thanks Wikipedia. Just be vague about it, why don't you? God, it didn't. It just doesn't even say so. Yeah, pretty much that's what I have to say about that. Honestly, about this new game. Hold on, I'm trying to see which arm. Wikipedia is so vague. It just says an arm transplant, and it's like, oh, thanks, thanks. Yeah, sorry, this can't be that interesting. Oh, it is. Oh, it's right hand. Revolver Ocelot loses his right hand. So there goes that theory, but still, it was an interesting idea. Or I thought it was anyway that I came up with. So. What this does mean for me when it comes to Metal Gear Solid 5 is that I now don't know what console I'm going to get. Because I already have a Wii U, but of course coming this spring, or this autumn, God I'm an idiot, coming this holiday season, just in time for Christmas, will be the new Xbox and the new PS4. Oh, I also should mention that Battlefield 4 is coming out for this holiday season. I kind of assumed that was obvious, but yeah. But yeah, so now I need to decide which console I'm going to get. Of course, I'm going to decide this once the new Xbox comes out. But back in the day when I was trying to choose between an Xbox and a PS3, it really was the only reason I wanted a PS3 was for Metal Gear Solid 4. But due to the price, I didn't get one. I got an Xbox just purely because it was cheaper. There was more games I pretty much wanted on the PS3 at the time, but it was purely a cost thing. But now this year, when the new consoles are coming out, I have a bit more wiggle room here. I can kind of afford to get a more expensive console if I kind of choose. So I'm really now on the fence about this, but at the moment I'm all in with the PS4. Of course, I was impressed by what Sony announced, but there's a good chance that Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, will only come out on the PS4, knowing how, the Metal Gear Solid has been. I hope this doesn't happen, but I don't know. My point is that this really is a big factor for me, and I'm sure it's going to be for some people. And of course, a new Metal Gear Solid game it's not a big enough franchise where it can kind of bring a console up. I mean, honestly, with the PS3, Little Big Planet did 10 times more for that console than Metal Gear Solid 4 ever did. So yeah, so now it's become a factor for me, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. Ideally, it would come out on the Wii U, but that's absolutely not happening. Right, so yeah, those are the two big game announcements, and they're pretty big game announcements, One was surprising and interesting, and one was kind of dull and predictable, but not here to talk about that. Well, not anymore anyway. We've got two smaller stories, and the first one is that the Square Enix president has stepped down. He has, completely stepped down from the company, I believe. And the reason he gave is that Square Enix has not been doing well recently. And it says that, quick line here, while the company had been predicting net income losses of 3.5 billion yen, this has now been revised to 13 billion, following a decline in Western retail and digital sales. Now, this is kind of the only reason I'm talking about it is because this kind of came as a shock to me. It seems odd that Square Enix would kind of start suffering now. I really don't know what that's all about. As a gamer or as a consumer, it seems like Square Enix has been doing better than ever. They released the new Hitman game, Hitman Absolution. That did well. They re-released Hitman HD Collection, or re-released those games. They seem to sell well. I mean, it's kind of odd the amount of games that actually came out during last holiday season, and most of them sold well. You know, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry 3. A lot of games came out, and a lot of them did well. The new Tomb Raider was published by them, Deus Ex. So it seems like if they were going to do badly, then why did this kind of happen now? They said that it's due to, like I just said, it's due to the decline in Western sales. So obviously they're doing okay in Japan, but just looking at the list of games that have recently come out that would cause this, none of them seem that bad. I guess Sleeping Dogs? It seems like Sleeping Dogs would be the only one that would kind of mess them up. I guess Square Enix has always kind of had some sort of niche appeal, but now that they're trying to compete with the big boys and invest all this money into Hitman and Tomb Raider to publish those games, that I guess even though they're selling way more than any other Square Enix games has, I guess they just can't kind of compete. So it's all very odd that this has kind of happened now because, and the reason why I keep saying that is because you would think that their biggest franchise, right, you would argue it's Final Fantasy. And Final Fantasy has been in decline for years. I think the last one to do really well was, I guess, arguably 10? I think 12 did alright, but I think 10 was the last one to do really well. 13 sold pretty well, but was kind of critically panned. And then 13-2... Actually, no, neither of those games were critically panned. If you read the reviews, or the Japanese reviews of 13-2, they love that game. They think it's amazing, and I thought it was pretty decent. But yeah, so that's why this thing's odd. They seem to, as a gamer, have their best year ever in years back, since the glory days. And of course, they have Dragon's Quest, which is a really big franchise for them, but only really in Japan. So I don't know. I guess that it's good that this guy has stepped down, because it seems like the only reason they would lose 13 billion yen is due to poor management. It must be. It must be somebody in the company higher up just messed up and didn't know what they were really doing, and invested in a lot of things that they probably shouldn't have done, and yeah, just kind of messed around with all the money they got, even though with Hitman. So yeah, so I think that's kind of pretty interesting, because I don't think, yeah, with Tomb Raider, they didn't have to acquire the license. They've had the license for Tomb Raider for a while. So it's really odd that this has kind of happened now, but maybe this was a build-up of all the years, because they haven't had a great generation, but they do seem to be picking up Square Enix, so I don't know. Obviously, the new Final Fantasy game, Lightning Returns, probably won't be good, but we'll see. We will see. Okay, so the last news I'm going to talk about is a Wii U topic, okay? I will have to say, or apologise on, and not apologise at the same time, about talking about the Wii U so much. I'm a massive Nintendo guy, and I have a Wii U, so I'm going to talk about it a lot because I'm a fan. But also, I find the Wii U really is interesting. It's one of the most interesting consoles to come out in a long time. Because, well, I won't get into all that, but I find it very interesting. Even if you dislike the console, you have to admit it's an interesting console. And the fact that Nintendo is one of the biggest gaming companies out there, and they're currently kind of like all over the place with this Wii U. They're doing some things right, some things wrong, but probably not enough right. So yeah, the news was that the Wii U can't run Unreal 4, which is the new engine by Epic. And of course, the Unreal Engine is a very popular engine, running games like Gears of War and all that kind of stuff. They're the main ones. I don't know too much about game engines to kind of go through and identify. And my phone's kind of... Yeah, my phone just went off. Let's throw that over there so it doesn't interrupt me. But yeah, it's a kind of a weird story because it came out at GDC that one of the guys at Epic, they got asked, hey, can the Wii U run Unreal 4 because it's their new engine for the new consoles, for the next generation. It's for the next line of games. So someone said, hey, can the Wii U run it? And he was like, no. What are you, dumb? And I don't have his exact quotes, but his paraphrasing was that this engine is all about the next generation, so it can't be run on current gen like the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii U. So yeah, there was a bit of backlash from that. Not really, but then he has recently retracted that statement and said, in fact, the Wii U can run Unreal 4. And then his argument was, let's have a quick look here. His argument was that, yeah, sure, you can make a game using Unreal Engine for any kind of console. And it's kind of, obviously he just hates the Wii U, because his quote is that, if someone wants to take an Unreal Engine 4, if someone wants to take Unreal Engine 4 and ship a game on the Wii U, they can. If they want to ship an Unreal Engine 4 game on the Xbox 360, they could make it happen. The scalable nature of Unreal Engine means we'll see it running in browsers and mobile in the future, and maybe current gen consoles as well. So this is just a really odd kind of story here, because obviously there's this guy who's like, no, he obviously hates the Wii U and the idea that he would make this engine and then people would care. It's very odd, because obviously it's just someone who hates it. Although I can kind of see where he's coming from, and I think the reason why he initially denied the whole, or was disgusted by the idea of his engine being on the Wii U, is because I think he was like, hey, I've made this new engine, or Epic has made this new engine that I've worked on, and he's trying to, it's all about the technology with the engines, it's not about gameplay. No one cares about gameplay when it comes to a brand new engine. So that's Nintendo's philosophy, let's make good fun games, not, so that obviously goes against the Wii U entirely. So I think he was probably kind of offended by the idea that people would care about the Wii U when it came to the Unreal Engine 4, because Unreal Engine 4 is about, whoa, look at that tree, it's massive, and look at them bullet holes on that sign, that's crazy, there's detail, it's like I'm there. Who directed this? James Cameron? It's nuts. So, yeah, I think this guy's kind of just a bit of a dick, if I'm being quite honest, but I don't know. What this really comes down to is that the whole thing's still on the fence with the Wii U. Obviously, it's falling towards not being great, but, because I made the point last week about how with Deus Ex, Human Revolution coming to the Wii U, does it turn out, or is it that the Wii U is actually really cheap and easy to develop for, so what's the likelihood we're going to see future or next-gen games come out for the thing alongside the PS4 and the new Xbox? So this story interested me because it was like, okay, so it can technically run Unreal Engine 4, so I think it's going to be very interesting to see if developers are going to take the time and the resources to the games they make with Unreal Engine 4, are they going to port them to the Wii U and release them on that as well? And again, I think it comes down to how cheap it is and if the Wii U actually gets some sort of fan base going, or can get some sort of momentum during 2013. But, it's pretty cool that it can run it, and I think it's going to be even more interesting when games are released side by side, because with the Wii, that is the scale. All you have to do is take Modern Warfare 3 on the Wii and take it for the PS3, and there's such a big difference that it's laughable. So I'm wondering if we're going to have that same distance. If Modern Warfare 4 comes out in the Wii U, and if it also comes out in the PS4, what is that difference going to be? Because of course Black Ops 2 came out on the Wii U, and it looked great. There was nothing wrong with it. It didn't look amazing, but it looked good. It definitely did look good. Black Ops 2 is kind of an ugly game anyway, so that's all I have to say on gaming news. Of course, there's always tons of gaming news, but I don't really have anything to say about it. So let's have a look at some games and what has come out recently. So the big release this week that came out a few days ago was Army of Two: The Devil's Cartel. Yeah, I'm such an idiot. My handwriting's awful. Yeah, The Devil's Cartel. One question about this: how is there a third one? Why did EA make 3 Army of Two games? What were they thinking? Was the first game such a big hit? Now, the first game came out of this new direction EA took halfway through this generation, where they just suddenly gave a load of money to all these different developers and say, make a game because we need to fix our public image and we want to try and do something different from just releasing FIFA and Madden every year. So that's where we got Mirror's Edge, that's where we got Dead Space, and that's where we got Army of Two from. But it wasn't a big hit. Some people brought it because it was a AAA title technically and people kind of enjoyed it. But then it kind of went away. and then they made a sequel, and then that did okay, I guess, but nobody cared. And then how did a third one get released? It's so bizarre. And the bizarre thing about it is that it's not a massive series. It's not a really popular series where people really love that game and it sells a stupid amount. Maybe it does sell a stupid amount, I don't know, but it's not. That's the thing. You either have to be an original series or a really popular one. Sometimes both, or hopefully both, to kind of be to have a series, to have a series of games come out, to have a franchise. But this is just nothing. It's decently popular, but it's not original. Because that's the thing that confuses me. That the whole game it's a war kind of game, but it focuses on two characters, and it's co-op. The whole point of it's called Army of Two, so the whole focus is on co-op. But this seems to be completely unnecessary. There's tons of co-op games out there, and if you want a army kind of macho guys fighting a load of people, third-person co-op, Gears of War already exists. You can already go out and play Gears of War. That has that. That has a large focus on co-op, and you can play those games single player as well. But yeah, that seems to be a very similar franchise, but Gears of War has a bit more to it than that. So it seems weird that the Army of Two games are still going and that people are still buying them, but this should be the last one. The reviews have been pretty terrible. It's selling so bad. I went to play.com just now because it got released the other day, and out of all video games, it's a brand new AAA title published by EA, and it's at 36 in the charts. So it's obviously not selling well. So yeah, I think that's the end of Army of Two. And I want to say good riddance, but I only played the first one for a short time. And it's not a franchise that I'm really fussed about. So not that much else came out. We kind of already got hit by the wave of games. But I want to talk about BioShock Infinite for a bit, because that game has been getting such good reviews. I still haven't played it. I will pick it up at some point, and I'll definitely talk about it. If I don't review it, I will definitely talk about it on this podcast. But the thing is, with the original BioShock, that had it's. I don't want to seem like a hater or a troll here, but I don't like PC games, and there's something really off-putting to playing a game that was obviously meant for the PC on a 360. The only ones that could put them off were the Elder Scrolls games and Fallout. Those were the only ones that I could put up with it. It's why I didn't like Far Cry 3. And the problem I have with it is that it makes the gameplay really weak. Because BioShock 1 was a game that there was a lot to it, story-wise. The graphics were amazing, a lot of good ideas, a very interesting game. So much to it, great, just really enjoyable game. But because it was a PC game, the gameplay was just really weak. The shooting was annoying, the enemies moved really frantically. You had to... It had a weird system where you had a health bar, but you got shot so randomly and inconsistently that there was very little skill to the combat, apart from just leveling yourself up, and the combat was weak. But because you got shot all the time, they just gave you a stupid amount of health upgrades or health packs. So you were just constantly hitting the heal button during fights as you just randomly went around. And that's what I'm kind of worried about. I don't want that same experience from BioShock Infinite. And I mean, maybe I should do some more research, but that's what I'm asking you guys. Anyone who's played BioShock Infinite, leave a comment below, because I need to know, because nobody talks about this problem with the original BioShock, that it's a PC game, not a console game, which means that the first-person shooter mechanics are pretty weak, and are just annoying sometimes. It doesn't make it a bad game, it just makes it not fun to play. It's just purely a story experience. So, if you've played BioShock Infinite, and you know what I'm talking about with the original BioShock, then let me know. Is BioShock Infinite the same? Is the gameplay fixed? Does it actually feel like an enjoyable gameplay experience, or is it just an enjoyable story? Because if it's just an enjoyable story, then I can wait. But if it's actually a really good game gameplay-wise, then I'll buy it. Then I will play it, sooner rather than later. So, yeah, we also have Need for Speed Most Wanted U. Don't have much to say about that. I mean, of course, I played the demo for Most Wanted, and it's awful. Um, if you're going to have an open world car game does not make sense, and I have no idea why Criterion Games keeps forcing this idea. With Burnout Paradise and Most Wanted, it didn't work, so I have no interest in this one. But I have not seen it anywhere apart from online. And it's the same with The Amazing Spider-Man. That recently got re-released on the Wii U. And I kind of wanted to play it, but I have not seen it in any shops. It's embarrassing with the Wii U at this point. So, yeah, all these ports are coming out on the Wii U, but you just can't buy them in shops. And something else I want to quickly mention is Mass Effect 3 The Citadel DLC. It's the final piece of DLC, and I want to quickly mention it because I'm amazed they keep making these DLCs. I don't care about DLCs when it comes to Mass Effect. Mass Effect, I kind of like as a contained story, especially the third one. So I have no idea why you would download the new DLC and play it. It's just kind of a bit odd to me. So, oh well, that's it for gaming news and new games that are coming out. So let's get to the topic. Now, this topic is kind of a bit vague. It's not. Normally, I want to ask a question and try and get to some sort of answer to it. Like last week we was what was the best Halo game? And ultimately the answer we got was Halo Reach, even though of course there was discussion about it. But this one, the way I phrased the question on my notes is, are releases / remakes a good idea? Now, of course, that question is it's not a good question, so that's why I'm saying this is a more general one. Because of course they are. Of course it's a good idea to re-release your game. Of course it's a good idea to remake your game for a new console and do new things with it. But people have problems with them. And I'm going to start off with why people don't like them, because I can kind of see where they're coming from. Because sometimes when a company will re-release a game and remake it, they'll just do it lazily. The more recent examples of this has been the HD collections. Now, the HD collections that have been, have sprung up over the last 2 years are really good ideas. If you go back and play old PS2 Xbox games, they have not aged well. They don't. Some of them look great if you look at Silent Hill 3 and things like that, but especially first half of the PS2 era games just have not aged too well. And of course, with how big TV are, or big, having a big 50-inch TV, you can't sit down and play Time Splitters 2 on that thing without being ugh, this is kind of a bit gross to just generally look at. So HD collection, or the HD games are definitely a good idea, but the problem I have with them and people have is that they're lazy. And that's the whole problem with re-releases and remakes. Are they ultimately a good idea, or are they ultimately just a lazy way to make more money? Of course, to answer that question, you have to go case or point by point and look at different cases. And when it comes to the HD remakes, I have to say they're a lazy idea. They're a good idea because it means you can play older games, With the Ratchet & Clank collection, you can go back and play Ratchet & Clank 1, and you can just turn on your PS3, slap it in, and you don't have to kind of squint, or you don't have to put up with the graphics. Everything looks crisp, but it's pretty much the same game you remember. Great. But so many of these HD collections are just lazy. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but you have to look at the Silent Hill collection, and there's only 2 games, Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. And a lot of people have panned those remakes or HD versions because they took out certain elements. Now, if you're going to port a game, then you kind of have to just port it. You can fix a few things, but yeah, to make a big change like getting rid of all the fog. Now, the reason why they got rid of the fog, I believe, is because the reason why the fog exists in Silent Hill isn't because it's scary and ghost. It's because of technical difficulties. With the original Silent Hill 1, they wanted there not to be loading screens, and they wanted to have an open world where you explored this town. But there was, they had to kind of get around the PS1's limitations of not being able to load as quick as the N64. Because that's why Nintendo ultimately used cartridges over discs, but that's not for now. So they added in smoke everywhere, or fog everywhere and mist. So obviously with the HD collections, with Silent Hill 2 and 3, they can kind of get rid of that a bit, because the consoles are a lot better. But I think with the HD collections, a lot of the times they were just kind of misses. They just kind of not all of them were bad, but it seems like if you're going to make a game in HD and re-release it, you can do something more with that, right? Like there's more you can do. I don't expect a big graphical upgrade when it comes to HD ports, and overall I think HD ports are a good thing. But like with the Metal Gear Solid collection, those are the only two HD collections I own or have owned. Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill, so that's where my point of reference comes from. And they're probably like two of the worst, because Metal Gear Solid, there was a lot more effort than the Silent Hill game, or the Silent Hill one. And the problem with the Silent Hill HD collection as well is that there was two games and it didn't include the first one, or even Silent Hill 4, which is just odd. But with Metal Gear Solid HD collection, I wanted Twin Snakes. You know, Twin Snakes was a remake of the original for the GameCube. It would have been awesome to see it again. And I think that's what this all comes down to with the ports. Not the remakes, the ports and the re-releases where it's essentially the same game, is that you can never really be satisfied. As someone in a company, it's quite an easy thing to do, and it's fan-pleasing in one way, because it's like, oh, I can play this game again. But if you're going to be porting games and doing a HD collection, I don't think you can't satisfy the fans. Because, I kind of caught myself being disappointed by the Metal Gear Solid HD collection because it didn't have the Twin Snakes. And I still say that's valid. But that's just greed. That is just consumer greed right there. Because it comes with Peace Walker, a game that was only available on the PSP that did critically well. It came with Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and it also came with Metal Gear 1 and 2 that were Metal Gear Solid, or Metal Gear 2 is only available on Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, I think it's called, the remake or the re-release of Snake Eater on the PS2. So really there's a ton of great content there, and you can say that with quite a lot of these HD collections. So it's one of those things that I think people expect way too much when it comes to ports, and it always comes to, everyone wants a game to feel special, like you can't just recreate the experience you originally had with it. Or you can't just like say, oh, here's that game again, buy it, buy it, buy it. I think that's the point that you kind of have to avoid as a game company. You kind of have to keep your game sacred by not releasing it on every single console. And of course that's where Sega ultimately failed with the Sonic games, because they re-released them on every single console. So now playing the original Sonic the Hedgehog has no charm to it, apart from maybe your nostalgia. But then again, you've probably killed off your nostalgia. So, of course, on the face of it, it seems amazing to be able to play any game on any system. But I think companies do have to be careful when it comes to the ports to try and make it special, to keep their game special and keep it in people's mind as something they enjoy, even though they could probably make more money in the long run, because some people will just obsessively buy ports no matter what. So this kind of brings me onto actual remakes, because I really enjoy remakes, or I love the idea of redoing a game. And I'm not saying anything new here. I'm not saying anything interesting like, hey, I like it when they remake a game I like. That's not a crazy thing to say. And of course it's not a lazy idea, because they have to pour resources into it to make it, special. But the great thing about remakes is that it avoids the problem that I just mentioned. It avoids the problem of a game being special to a gamer, and and you don't want too much of it. It's a bit like it's the whole thing. You couldn't eat ice cream every day, because then you would just get sick of ice cream. It's that. But with a remake, it becomes its own separate thing. It becomes its own separate game. Like, you can separate. The reason I'm talking about this is because I've had to deal with remakes a lot. I'm currently doing a Let's Play of Super Mario 64 DS, and that's really got me thinking about the subject of remakes. Because that game, Super Mario 64 DS, is a good example of how remakes should be done. Also, there's some problems with it, but that's not for here. Because it's its own separate game. There's 30 more stars, there's more content to it, there's 3 more playable characters, the graphics have been upgraded. So when a remake comes along and defines itself as its own title, then that is a successful remake. Even if it's not as good, even if it pales in comparison to the original, a lot of people would say that the original N64 Super Mario 64 is better than the DS version, but it's still a successful remake, because It doesn't taint with your original experience, but it gives you something new and fresh and something else to enjoy. And that's exactly what a remake should do. And it's why I think people or companies need to put more time and effort into these kind of remakes. Because again, like I was talking about Twin Snakes, I could just go out and buy Metal Gear Solid 1. That game exists, I can easily play that. But I want Twin Snakes. And the reason why I want Twin Snakes is because it's the remake. Better graphics, just tons of stuff added to it, better controls, and just, yeah, it's its own separate game. Twin Snakes and Metal Gear Solid 1 on PS1 are two separate entities, even though they're the same game, essentially. So that's what a good remake should make you do. That you kind of separate them in your head. So you don't taint your experience, but you still get a new experience based off something you enjoy. And it's why I kind of want to see more remakes. But the only company that really does them are Nintendo. And they're the masters of it. Super Mario 64 DS, again, with the control issues, it's not as good as the original. But it's still really good. Pokemon Fire Red, there's a ton. I could kind of list a ton. I couldn't, that's why I'm not. But I could Google it and find out quite a lot. But, you know, I want to see it more and more, and I'm hoping we will, but I don't think we will, because DuckTales remasters are coming out, and that's a complete remake of that game. It's remastered. They put it in the title. Brand new graphics, more areas, just better presentation. But the reason why that is going to succeed, and already has succeeded, is maybe it's not as good. Maybe you buy it, you pick it up, you play it through, and you're like, well, this isn't the same game, so I didn't enjoy it that much. It's okay, I guess, but this isn't what I don't really enjoy that. But it's still going to be successful because it's going to be its own entity, because you can still go back and play the original. You know, of course, a version of a bad re-release or remake or whatever is Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance, because it took the original game, didn't add anything, and just made it worse, so it kind of in a way taints your memory of it. Now luckily there's so many different versions of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 out there that it didn't affect the game's credibility or affect people's opinion of the game. But if that was the most recent version of it, it's kind of like if, like with Sonic CD, if they re-released Sonic CD on the Game Boy Advance and did a terrible job with it, then people wouldn't really like that game as much, because the only other version would have been on the Sega CD. Now I know it was on the Sonic Gems collection, but you get my point. You know, a bad port or remake can taint an opinion or a person's opinion of a game and a game's reputation. Now, I personally, don't crucify me for this, or, I'm sure there are examples, but I personally can't think of any ports that actually affected the game overall to the point where you'd be like, you think less of the game. Now, of course, you have different versions of the game, like with Bayonetta 1, the 360 version was the far superior one, because on the PS3 it didn't run as good. But that obviously didn't taint the what people thought about that game. People still really liked it. But I don't know. I think, I'm not really trying to make one solid point here. I'm just saying I think overall remakes and re-releases are done really well. I think a lot of the time it's just getting the game out there. And one thing I really enjoy is because it's easy access as well. It's the accessibility of doing this, because back with Chrono Trigger is one of the best games I've ever played. It's definitely the best JRPG I've ever played. But I would never have played that if they didn't put it on the DS. And even though the graphics are the same, that is definitely the superior version of the game, and I never would have played it because it was Japan only up to that point. So of course, when they're porting over games and re-releasing them for the first time, then in a certain region it's always going to be a good thing. But I think that's the interesting thing about remakes, though, is that Nintendo are the only ones that really do it, or games that came out on Nintendo system. Now, of course, there are examples of this where this isn't the case. Just looking at my PS2 games, Okami came out on the Wii and Capcom did it. But that's about it. There really just doesn't... You just don't see it that much on the 360. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with just it hasn't been around long enough. And I think with the PlayStation, okay, Final Fantasy X HD is coming out, but that's like the first one for a while. And of course, a lot of games have been ported to that console with the PSN, but I think the reason why with Nintendo, they have such a rich history of games that they can just port any of them if they want, remake them, put some bells and whistles on them, release them as a new game, sell 10 million copies, great. But I think with the PlayStation, because Sony didn't make a lot of the games, even though they own the rights to them, I think a lot of them they just can't do. Why wasn't there Spyro HD? I know the Spyro games have come out, but not in PAL. I don't think the Spyro games have come out in the PAL regions on PSN. From what I can tell. So that's definitely the problem with remakes. But if they can get a remake out, if they can get a HD collection out, then I'm happy with it. And I think people complain because it seems like laziness, but again, just vote with your wallet. If you see a port or a collection or a new version of a game you don't like, then you don't have to buy it. You never have to play it, and you can tell the company what you think by not buying it. Of course, the problem is that if you're a fan of the game, you're going to get it. So that's why some companies are lazy with their remakes and ports, because they don't have to put in effort because their fan base is going to buy it anyway. So I think in a way the companies could be a bit better with them, but overall they're good. So yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to say on the subject. I always this is the second one I've done by myself, and whenever I talk about the main subject in a podcast, I always feel like I am just rambling. But of course, that's a podcast. You just ramble because half the time the people listening aren't paying 100% attention anyway. Who could pay attention 100%? Who could concentrate on my voice for 52 minutes? It can't be done. You're a braver man than I if you could do that. So I want to quickly say thank you to everyone who came out for my stream. In case you don't know, I did my very first live stream in preparation for an event that's hopefully happening towards the end of April. So yeah, thank you to everyone who came out for that. It was a bit of disaster. The first 40 minutes there was no sound, and then I had Proto join me on the stream, and he was drunk, but then I couldn't get the audio of him to play through without it blaring in my ears. It was a mess. So I do have it all working and all set up now. So hopefully I'll be streaming more in the future, but yeah, thank you for the support there. So I guess it's time to end of the podcast. So thank you very much for listening. And as always, if you don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more episodes, and don't forget that every single episode you can download the MP3 in the thing below. So hopefully next week I'll have a guest, but we will see. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you guys next week.